Okay, we are plowing our way through, slogging our way through, it might seem like to you, the logical fallacies. And as I've said before, these are things that we spend a lot of time on because I like to believe that they are useful to you beyond just for the purpose of completing an elective course. Because by understanding these fallacies, you can understand better when someone is mistaken in how they are putting their fallacies together, or they may be intentionally trying to use a fallacious argument in order to get you to agree with them. We do it to ourselves too as we process things. I mean, we definitely are guilty of these as individuals. At least most of us are. As we've discussed before, human beings are not naturally logical in typical settings. All right, so we got three categories today because there's fewer in each category. The first category are fallacies of ambiguity. I'm sorry, presumption. The second one is fallacies of ambiguity. And the third one is fallacies of illicit transference, which sounds very, spy novel or drug deal or something weird that shouldn't be going on, right? But it's really trying to transfer a quality to something else that doesn't logically follow. Presumption is what it sounds like. You may be presuming your argument to be true, and therefore you don't present the argument as if it's an argument at all. And ambiguity is what you might expect as well, in that it is the use of words that aren't entirely clear. Okay, so fallacies of presumption. The first one we want to talk about is probably one of the most common, which is begging the question. And this is basically what parents often tell toddlers, right? Or maybe young children, right? Go clean up your room. Why? Well, because it's good for you to learn to clean up your room. Why? Because you should have to take care of your stuff. Why? And finally, the parent gets very frustrated because they're trying to give the child logical reasons, and either it's not landing with the kid or the kid's being obstinate, but ultimately the parent goes, because I said so, right? Now, a begging the question tends to have that because I said so ring to it. It's committed when the arguer creates the illusion that premises that are being used, which are inadequate, provide adequate support for the conclusion. So all the parents' first premises were adequate, but the because I said so one is not adequate for why you should clean up your room, right? Except it is, if you've ever been a parent. Okay, so there are a couple ways this manifests. Don't worry too much about these. They're just kind of interesting. The premise can be shaky, right? The theft is wrong because taking things that don't belong to you is unethical. Okay, well, but if you say taking things that don't belong to you is unethical, isn't that the same as theft is wrong? It is. So therefore, it's a begging the question fallacy of presumption. The premise is sometimes just a restatement or a validation of the of what the conclusion is. The Bible is true because it says so in the Bible, right? So it says so in the Bible, therefore the Bible is true. It's just a restatement of the premise. And then circular arguments that beg the question are things like democracy is the best form of government because it ensures freedom. Freedom is important because it allows democracy to thrive, and democracy ensures that we remain free. See the circle there? You can make an argument that democracy is the best form of government. You just can't base it on circular reasoning. And you would have heard people say, well, that's circular reasoning or something similar before, because it's a common occurring type thing when you've run out of really legitimate things. The Bible is true because the Bible says it's true. There are other ways to explore the validity of what's in the Bible, and it does not require relying on the Bible. The argument, if you're going to make an argument that the Bible's true, you either have to go down the road of historic study, textual criticism, or you've got to just say, I believe it's true because I choose to believe it's true. That's not a valid argument from a logical standpoint. But then again, religion is often not treated by many people as something that should be logical. Okay. See, I always do that. I never know why it does that. But okay, so that was begging the question. There's something else called a loaded question, and excuse the pun here of a loaded gun. But a loaded question is a little bit like someone pointing a loaded gun at you, except a loaded question is much more comfortable. So this is when two or more questions are asked in the guise of a single question, and a single answer is required of both, right? It's basically given of both. So have you stopped cheating on your exams is basically assuming that it's asking one question or two questions under the guise of two. Do you cheat on your exams or do you not cheat on your exams? Except by merging them together and presuming that you do, then it makes it impossible for you to answer the question in any way other than a way that incriminates yourself. We can't say yes because that means you were cheating on your exams. You can't say no because that means you are cheating on your exams. The problem is with the question being asked in the merger of two questions in one in an assumption of the answer. So the assumed answer, the questions are again, do you cheat on your exams or do you not cheat on your exams? Merged together, the assumption is made that you do, and therefore it leaves you facing what's sometimes called a complex question, also called a loaded question. This is a false dichotomy, and a false dichotomy is when you're given two choices and there's more than two choices. So these are some examples over here, and typically you're going to find either or in here, either or. This one doesn't have it, but it does right there, either or. You may run into one that doesn't have either or, specifically verbatim, but it could still be a false dichotomy, though it might be bad grammar. So this is basically, either you're with us or you're against us. Well, that's oversimplifying, right? I could be for you, but not approve of something you're doing. It doesn't mean I'm not for you, right? In fact, by pointing out something that I think you shouldn't be doing, that might be the best example of how I'm for you. Either cut taxes or the economy will collapse. That's a false dichotomy because cutting taxes does not guarantee the economy will not collapse or collapse, will be vigorous or won't be vigorous, will be successful or won't be successful. And then the last one, you can either pursue a high-paying career or live a life in poverty. Well, no, you can live a life of just enough, right? You can live a life of making enough money to live like you want to. That doesn't mean you need a high-paying career, right? A high-paying career, that's a different kind of lifestyle, but there's not only two lifestyles, poverty or rich, though it's increasingly kind of looks that way in some economies. Basically, an arguer here is trying to eliminate an alternative. in order to persuade you, right? So beware of false dichotomies, because basically it's not a complex or loaded question, but it is a false presumption being used against you to put you in one camp or the other, when in fact um, it's not that simple, right? One that's not on here that's pretty common is, well, if you don't support the war, you're against our military men and women. How could you be these men and women that give their lives, make a commitment that could end in giving their lives for our country? How could you be against them? Well, then I'm against a war has nothing to do with how I feel about the men and women who serve our country in the military. In fact, again, you could argue that trying to prevent a war or be against a war or insist that there are other options but a war is the greatest kind of support for the military men and women of our country. So false dichotomy is very popular these days in our society. All right. So fallacy of suppressed evidence is the arguer just leaves something out, right? It might be easier just to think of it that way. They don't even mention it. They don't suppress it. They just exclude it, right? They I guess you could, try to deprioritize it, like lighten what it really means. I guess that's possible. So you try to take a part that's negative to your argument and you downplay how significant it is. But most of the time it's just people leaving stuff out. So the new health supplement must be safe because it's made from natural ingredients. Well, there are naturally occurring ingredients that aren't safe. Hemlock is a naturally occurring tree, and hemlock will kill you. Just ask our friend Socrates. There are plenty of, there's copper. Copper naturally occurs, right? You don't want to eat copper, right? You don't want lead to get in your bloodstream, right? So I don't know if lead's naturally occurring, so don't hold me to that. But you get the idea. Natural elements, this has been used a lot in the whole organic food movement, right? Natural elements. Well, natural elements are not good, necessarily good for you or safe. Uranium is a naturally occurring element, if I'm not mistaken, and for sure, you wouldn't find that on the list of healthy things to eat. So, take what's that. I just answered the question for you. What's additional evidence is being suppressed is that not all things that are natural are healthy for you. All right. So, fallacies. So that was fallacies of presumption, right? And the presumption being made on this, the last one was really a presumption that health and natural are the same. That's the presumption the arguer is trying to get you to assume, or it might be the assumption the person is assuming. If so, help them out. Be sure and tell them not everything that's natural do you want to put in your mouth. And there are some grosser examples than the ones I pointed out. So fallacies of ambiguity rely upon shifts of meaning between the premise and the conclusion. So equivocation is probably one of the ones that is, it trips people up a lot, because basically equivocation is another one of those $5 words that means a pun, right? It's basically someone taking advantage of a dual meaning of a word and using it in one way in the premises, in another in the conclusion. So the sign said, fine for parking here, so I assumed it was fine to park there. Okay, we know that the fine for parking here means that if you park here, you'll get a fine. Therefore, it is the opposite of fine to park there. Fine meaning okay, or fine meaning a penalty for having done something that's against the law. A feather is light, and what is light cannot be dark, so a feather cannot be dark. All right. See the pun, or the dual use of the use of a word in two different ways um, that do not logically follow. A light can be light, like doesn't weigh much, or light can be when you have the lights on as opposed to when you don't have the lights on, or when the sun's up and when the sun's not up. So you see kind of the pun aspect of this. It's equivocation is the big word. We have the right to free speech, so it's right for me to say whatever I want. Okay, right and right have two different meanings here, right? The right is something guaranteed by our Constitution, our government, the legal system. Right in its second use is used as if it were morally okay or ethically such that you can say whatever you want, which is not true, right? In many countries you can't say whatever you want, and those are countries with free speech as a right, but they will not let you use hate speech. In the United States, it's currently, according to the Supreme Court, permissible to use hate speech. It used to not be, but in some countries, hate speech is out of bounds, like a number of the European countries. Oh boy, amphibian is what I always want to call this. Amphibole is a fallacy that's committed when the arguer misinterprets an ambiguous statement and draws a conclusion based on a faulty interpretation. So basically, the arguer takes a statement, misinterprets it, and then draws a conclusion from the misinterpreted statement. So it just ends up being false because they didn't understand what the statement meant in the first place. Congress passes bill to support struggling families. Critics say it will hurt them. All right, so is the hurt on Congress, or is the hurt on struggling families? Right? So you might interpret this as saying, well, so passing this bill is going to hurt Congress, right? Or passing this bill is going to hurt struggling families, which seems unlikely, though things are pretty complicated when we start trying to involve government support for things. And don't get me wrong, we should help struggling families, but what that means can be kind of complicated. This is a good example of that amphibole, right? The confused interpretation. Mayor supports police crackdown on crime. Suspects demand justice. Mayor supports police crackdown on crime. Suspects demand justice. Mayor supports police crackdown on crime. Suspects demand justice. So there are a number of different ways to interpret this. Well, for one thing, depending on how you say it, which is generally either indication you need a comma or you need more clarification in the statements being made. This has a misspelling in it. Can anybody guess what it is? Well, it's want to eat, Grandma. Shouldn't be what to eat, Grandma. Want to eat, Grandma. It could sound like, do you want to eat, Grandma? Or it could be, if you put a comma after eat, want to eat, comma, Grandma. Apologies for the misspelling. Probably of all these, the first one is the better one. If you put a comma here, this would mean mayor supports police crackdown on crime, comma, suspects demand justice. So mayor supports crackdown, the suspects demand justice. Or mayor supports crackdown on crime suspects, comma, demands justice, or demand justice, right? So, but this one's probably the better one because it truly shows how critics in the word hurt, it's really the word hurt the one that's confused here, but what who are the critics saying it will hurt is based on that ambiguity of the how the word heard is being used and who does it refer to. All right, fallacies of illicit transfer. So what these are these fallacies are the ones that are trying to take a quality um, and assign it to something, and that doesn't logically follow. These things can look very similar. These fallacies rely basically on a deceptive similarity in linguistic structure. So I'll show you what that means in a minute. So composition is where you try to take um, a quality of a single part of something and assign it to the whole. So the example here is each player on the basketball team is an excellent shooter, making the team the best shooting team in the league. Now, that might sound logical, but it's not necessarily so, right? The way the team functions as a group may be in a game situation, may be that on some nights this set of people are great shooters, and on other nights these set of people are great shooters, and overall we have a bunch of great shooters, but they're not on the same night. Therefore, the team doesn't shoot at a high percentage, or not as at high a percentage as the individual shooters. So the attribute that's being transferred here is field goal percentage or free throw percentage, depending on which one we're actually talking about. Maybe both. This would be like saying that atoms are invisible. The Brooklyn Bridge is made of atoms. Therefore, what? The Brooklyn Bridge is invisible. You're trying to take the invisibility of atoms and apply it to the Brooklyn Bridge, and that's a fallacy of composition, and it's not true. Right? Fallacy of division is the exact opposite of a fallacy of composition. This is trying to take an attribute of the whole and apply it to the parts. So, for instance, surely I have it, yeah. The soccer team is the best in the league, so every player must be the best player in the league. Or you could say, so every player is a all-star candidate, right? I mean, that's probably better. So the soccer team is the best in the league, so every player on our soccer team must be an all-star. Well, no, right? I mean, the soccer team may be a bunch of pretty average players that really play together well. Soccer is not an individual sport, right? Even in tennis, which is an individual sport, you can take two excellent singles players, two of the best. You could take number one and number two in the world and put them on a doubles team, and they can get beaten by a much lower ranked doubles team. Why? Because doubles is different than singles, right? One is where you depend on yourself. The other one's where you depend on a teammate. And somebody who plays doubles all the time knows that far better than somebody who plays singles all the time. So soccer, same thing. I mean, you might have a team of all-stars and not have a very good team because they don't know how to play together, right? They know how to be individually spectacular, but they don't know how to play together. So an attribute of division. So for instance, this desk I'm sitting at is brown. This desk is made of atoms, therefore atoms are brown. Same thing, reverse of the Brooklyn Bridge, right? So similar linguistic patterns, but different only in terms of which way the attribute is flowing. In composition, it's flowing from the one to the many. From division, it's flowing from the many to the one. Okay. So these are some fallacies you can look at. The committee made a poor decision, therefore each member must be incompetent. Well, no, that's not true. That is a fallacy of division, right? You're trying to take, committees make dumb decisions sometimes. That's generally why companies aren't run by committees. Committees have certain dynamics that aren't necessarily well suited for making bold leadership type decisions. They're going to make safe decisions most of the time. The more people in the room you have, the safer the decision generally is going to be. Whereas if you have one person in the room and a risky decision is needed, you're more likely to get the decision you need in that case, because sometimes a risky decision is needed. I support this bill. The governor said he would support the bill with his signature. All right, so think about this. This is amphibly, right? Oh, sorry, equivocation. Bleh. This is equivocation because you've got a word, support, and you've got another word, signature, that actually could mess this up too. But this picture is the governor supporting the bill. He's holding it up, right? So the governor said he would support the bill. If it didn't say with his signature, this image would be perfect. If he was supporting it with a picture of his signature, then in holding it up that way, then this would be another way this could be equivocation. Equivocation being the one I call the pun fallacy. This is not amphibly. I was wrong. Amphibly is something else altogether. We'll probably come to one. Equivocation is where you've got a different meaning being used for a word that is integral to understanding the argument or the statement being made. Okay, here's one. The economy is strong, so every citizen must be financially secure. What do you think? Oop. Division, right? The economy is strong, so everybody underneath, all the units in the economy, us, must also be doing really well. Well, no. So it's you're taking an attribute of the whole in assigning that attribute to the one or to a single unit, and that's just not going to hold because it's illogical. The new healthcare policy will save tax money for taxpayers, right? The new healthcare policy will save money for taxpayers. The new healthcare policy will save money for taxpayers, right? So this one is an amphibly. Again, it can be a little confusing. If you are confused on this, then do some practicing on ChatGPT. Just ask it to give you some examples of statements that are statements of, say, equivocation and amphibly, and then ask them ask them to grade you. Ask the AI to grade you on what your guess is. Just tell them you want it to test you, so you can figure out if So amphibly is equivocation is where you have one word with multiple meanings. Amphibly is one argument that can be understood in multiple ways. So because it's not clearly stated what is meant by a healthcare policy, right? Is it a policy? Like is it going to save? Is it an overall policy for how healthcare is done, or is it a healthcare policy, one that these guys with a load of money is going to benefit from? They'll get the money, and the taxpayers may save money too. I guess that's the way it works, right? So which fallacy is this? The president is a conservative, so he must conserve resources well. Equivocation, right? The word conserve is used in two different ways. A conservative is somebody that wants to conserve something, but not necessarily just resources. A political conservative is someone that wants to conserve the way things are, right? The way they have been in many cases, not always, but there is usually a conservative is not going to be striking out on a new path. They've seen something that works, they want to stay with that, and they want to use that going forward because it has worked. They are not going to entertain something new because it's risky, it might not work. So they are conserving something, but not like resources. We must either fully support the proposed legislation or face economic collapse. They got zombies on one side and happy people going to work, little robots on the other, and that's false dilemma, right? We don't have to support the proposed legislation or face zombies. I've never seen a piece of legislation, and I've been around a minute, never seen a piece of legislation that not supporting it meant the zombie apocalypse. Why does the mayor continue to support policies that harm our city? Remember the merging of two questions into one that makes an assumption about the answer, that then puts the person trying to answer it into a no-win situation? A loaded or a complex question. Loaded, remember, sometimes it's called complex. A recent study found that students who study late at night score higher on math tests. Therefore, studying late at night is the best way to improve your math test scores. Well, that is suppressing some evidence, right? It doesn't tell you exactly what other conditions were involved in the study. So I wouldn't run off and decide that cramming the night before and studying late every night, even if you're not cramming, is the best way. In fact, there's a lot of scientific work done on how we don't do really well remembering when we're fatigued. There's some suppressed evidence here, and that's what the image is supposed to be. He's got an ace up his sleeve or some kind of part of the study stuck in his pant waist, because that part tells you that the people died of stress by trying to study. They did well on math, but by staying up late, they also became manic, got depressed, whatever, had heart attacks because they stayed up too late to study. And this one you probably would get just by the GIF. We must increase military spending to strengthen our national defense because a stronger national defense requires more military spending. It's a circular argument, right? It begs the question. The argument assumes that it's trying to prove, assumes what it's trying to prove, right? So begging the question. This is a circular begging the question, which is probably, like I said before, one of the most common. And I think that's it. So let me know if you have any issues there. If the amphibole and equivocation thing continues to mess you up, let me know. I'll try and figure it out. Maybe find some examples of my own that would help you better lock it in. But that and anything else, if it comes up, let me know.